This morning, we are celebrating a legacy stretching all the way back to 1975, and that is Saturday Night Live. Joining us now from New York is Mark Barger, who has a preview of what's to come. Good morning, Mark. How are you doing out there?
I'm doing okay. It's a little brisk, but we'll get through it.
Now, Mark, there's a ton of festivities leading up to that 50th anniversary episode. So what can you tell us about what we can expect this weekend?
Well, I'm standing in front of Radio City Music Hall as well as NBC's 30 Rock headquarters, and those two buildings will be host to major milestone celebrations this weekend. There's a big concert going on in Radio City tonight. You can see that streaming on Peacock, but then the big 3-hour extravaganza Sunday night will be on NBC Live, and you can see that right here.
And Mark, you were telling us earlier that you were there for the SNL 40. So how do you think this anniversary will compare to that one?
I really think this is going to be a more emotional night for everyone. 40 was one thing, but this is 50, and there's just something about that round number of 50, half a century. And I think the weight and the impact of that is really going to hit some of the cast members when they think about the achievement that they made personally and collectively to make this show a landmark over 5 decades. And I think that's really just going to hit home, and we might see a few more tears on Sunday night. We didn't really see that 10 years ago, but I think there's every possibility we could see some real emotion on Sunday night.
And speaking of that longevity that they've had, something that's pretty iconic to SNL are those SNL cue cards. I mean, in such a digital age that we are in now, I know you got to learn actually about what goes into those cue cards. Why have they stayed in keeping that traditional card up for those on SNL?
Well, as you know, I'm sure you use teleprompters there in your studio. Just imagine if Saturday Night Live had teleprompters and they went down. And teleprompters do go down. I'm betting it's probably happened to you at some point in your career. When teleprompters go down and you have a 90-minute show and no one has memorized their lines because of all the changes they make up to the last minute, that's potential for disaster. And so that's why they've continued to rely on cue cards, roughly about 1,000 for every episode of Saturday Night Live. This 3-hour show on Sunday night is going to have roughly 2,500 cue cards. Now, normally they have about 10 people handling those cue cards. They're having to bring in 5 extra people just to handle those cue cards on Sunday night.
Wow, Mark, I know all about teleprompters not working mid-show, and it does get pretty hectic, but we have our backroom crew that handles all of that, so thank you for them. And that's amazing that they'll have more people on staff to help with those cue cards, being that this is a bigger show. With it being the 50th anniversary episode, have they said anything about what they're anticipating for that standby ticket line, which typically is pretty hectic?
You cannot get a ticket. You just don't. It's not even worth trying. I mean, there are people associated with the show that won't get into the show because there's only a limited capacity within Studio 8H. That's part of the reason they're having the concert, because Radio City can hold about 6,000 people. So that's enough to accommodate just about anyone who's had an association with the show, but they can't do that in Studio 8H. Even adding bleachers, there's not enough room for everybody, so they all can't get in. So much less the general public will not be attending in person this show on Sunday night. But it's going to be great. You'll see a lot of people that really have no association with the show probably. Back 10 years ago, Jack Nicholson, who's never been on the show, never appeared on the show, was part of that 40th anniversary special. So I think there's every possibility we could see some other wild cards like that, people not associated with SNL who wind up being part of the show Sunday night.
Well, thank you, Mark, so much for keeping us up to date with all the preview stuff and all of the stuff anticipating the 50th SNL anniversary. Stay warm out there and enjoy all the festivities with SNL this weekend. I'm going to send it back to you, Rashawn.